Well, with no further ado, I think we'll start with Amy. This is Amy Mason. This is Esther Gerritsen. Amy won the Dundee International Book Prize in 2014 for her debut novel, The Other Ida. According to her website, and from chit-chat we've had on Twitter, in between leaving school at 16 and publishing her novel, she held down a wide variety of jobs. But she's also no stranger to the fringe because she's a performer. She writes and then performs her own pieces. So you've been here several times with your own shows. And you started writing when in your 20s when you took a creative writing course.
Yeah, adult ed. Yeah, adult ed course.
Brilliant. Yeah. Okay, now Esther is from the Netherlands. She's known as a leading playwright and novelist there. And did I hear you on the way in say that now you write film as well?
Yes, I do.
So there's no stone left unturned because you also do journalism, don't you?
No, I don't.
You don't? Oh, this is all wrong then. Never believe the internet. She's also won a tremendous number of prizes, some of which I can't pronounce because I'm ignorant of the Dutch language. One is the Frans Kellendonk Prize, is that pronounced correctly? And something called the Libris Literature Prize.
Wow, I actually never won it.
Oh, wow, never mind.
I was nominated.
Mere technicality. Many others. Her book is called Craving, and it is the first of her books to be translated into English, which I think is quite curious, given how famous and how well-known and how big a profile you have in the Netherlands. So we're hoping that more and more of her books will become available to us soon. So everyone's going to do a little bit of reading, introduce you to their book. We'll talk individually, and then the three of us will talk amongst ourselves, and then you all have a chance to ask questions. So did you toss a coin? Do you know who wants to go first?
So The Other Ida is, as you'll know from the description of the event, it's about a sort of troubled relationship between a mother and daughter, or daughters, actually. Sort of the premise is that it's about a woman, she's a playwright, and she's an alcoholic, she's a total nightmare, and she writes this one famous play called Ida, and she names her first daughter after it. And then her daughter has this sort of to live up to her whole life, or live down to, because it's a bit of a tragedy, really, the play. And it's set over the course of the week of her mother's funeral, and Ida's been estranged from her family for nearly 10 years. And she finds out her mother has died, and she goes back home. And it's about her reconnecting with her sister, and they sort through her mother's possessions, and there's a bit of mystery as well about what happened to her mother, or her mother's life, really.
Now, how about a little flavor of the book?
Yeah, I'm going to read you something. If I can find it, just a second. Right. I realised I'd given away all the copies of my own book. This is my boyfriend's copy. Right. So, the play gets made into a film. And nothing's happened in their family for years. Their mother's just been drinking and drinking. They haven't really had any money. And then suddenly it gets made into a film, and they're going to the premiere of the film, which for both Ida and her mother is extremely exciting because they never really leave their house. And at this time, Ida is 14. It's set in 1983. The book's, it's set at the present time in the book is 1999. So 1983. When the man came round with his trolley, Bridie, who's the mother, ordered 2 glasses of Chablis, paying with the torn £10 note Ida had frantically helped her search for earlier. "Keep the change," she said, and Ida had to clasp her hands together to stop herself reaching out for it. She tried not to think about how they would pay for a cab to the hotel when they got off the train. It would all be all right. It was normally all right. The women sitting next to them shared a brief, wide-eyed look, shocked either at her mother's large tip, at Ida's age, or perhaps the fact it wasn't yet lunchtime. Next to these neat-haired women, Bridie looked mad. her long hair piled up with 2 black chopsticks sticking out of it, her shakily drawn-in eyebrows over her gaunt cheeks, and long fingers moving manically as she spoke. I mean, what can you learn anywhere at that crappy prim school, buried up to your ears in bloody geography books? I can teach you the important stuff. Yes, said Ida quietly. The film company had sent first-class tickets and she was trying hard to fit in, stretching her legs out slowly, attempting elegance and reserve, staring out of the window with a serious expression. Why are you speaking like that? Bridie asked. Like you've got something up your bottom. Ida didn't reply but took a swig of her warm wine and tried hard not to retch. Her mother was still talking, but she blocked out her words, noticing instead the regular sounds of the train and the colours of the blurred and drizzly world outside. She thought about the high shoes she had for later and the red strappy dress that showed off her boobs. She was secretly hopeful that she'd be spotted by someone important, someone who'd notice her je ne sais quoi. When they got to Waterloo Bridge, Bridie marched so quickly through the station. When they got to Waterloo, Bridie marched so quickly through the station that Ida had to run to keep up. She knew her mother, and the marching was a sure sign she didn't want to be questioned or hassled about the next stage of their journey. Just before the exit, a short, elderly man wearing a pink turban appeared. He was holding a sign saying, Bridie Adair and daughter. I've been told to look out for you. Are you Miss Adair? He asked. I am indeed, and this huge thing is my daughter, believe it or not. The man smiled nervously while Bridie guffawed. The car had tinted windows and Ida couldn't believe it. She was being driven by an actual driver in a car with blacked out windows like she was a film star. She tried to look straight ahead and ignore her mother, to pretend she was Anna da Costa, the star of the film, and that she travelled like this every day. As they drove over Waterloo Bridge, she noticed some people stop and stare, and it took all the strength she could muster not to wind down the window and wave. New starlet Ida Irons arrived to the premiere of her latest film. Bridie sighed and turned away from the window. The thing is, it's the English I hate. Any other race I absolutely adore. Where are you from, originally? Bridie asked the driver. Ida closed her eyes. Ealing, the man said, and laughed, even more nervously than before. Oh, God, she went on. Yes, the English, with their tracksuits and their fat asses and their bloody vol-au-vents. Surely they're French, Ida thought, but she knew better than to speak. Well, where are you from originally, then, the man asked. Ireland, she said, as if he was stupid for asking. Well, I had Irish parents. People know how to live there. It's not all potpourri and en suites and bloody Bruce Forsyth. The man didn't make a sound and kept his eyes fixed straight ahead. Ida didn't know whether to laugh or cry.
Let's talk about winning the prize. To go from never having published a book to winning a prestigious literary award, having your book published. Has that changed everything? Tell me about that. Tell me about what that was like.
It really has.
Because it's specifically for unpublished. Mm-hmm. It has to be your first novel. It has to be unpublished. Mm-hmm.
I think the thing is that most writers have got the wrong personality to be writers. Like, writers are normally like the most sensitive, pathetic creatures in the world, and you have to be so resilient. And so when I wrote the book and I got some criticism of it or things I should change, that obviously just sent me into a spiral of decline. It's no good crap, I'm never going to do anything. So this prize was really good because I just sent it off on a whim. You don't have to. Often you have to pay to enter competitions. You don't have to pay. And I sent it off. And luckily, they saw in it the potential, I suppose, and said, look, there's all this stuff you need to change, but we think it's got potential. So it's changed everything. I mean, since then, I've got an agent, and I sort of thought, well, maybe that's the end. Maybe I'll never write another book again because it was it's really hard. It takes ages. It's really boring. I thought, maybe I'll write another book ever again.
Yeah, you're really selling it.
Yeah. No, the book's not. The process is. And I thought, oh, God. But actually, I got an agent, and I think I've come up with a good idea for a new book. And I'm really pleased. It's brilliant. It's done everything. I think there are so many writers who've got really good books that they've done nothing with, and that's why it's an amazing prize, really.
It's tremendous. I read that one of the things you wanted to examine, I'm going to save the mother-daughter stuff for later when the three of us are chatting, because that's such a unifying theme. I read that you wanted to explore the nature of celebrity and what happens to celebrity children, which Ida is, even though her mother is a bit reclusive, and she has this moment, doesn't she, her mother, where she's just the word on everyone's lips. What made you curious? It's the tattoo flyover. We're not under siege.
Yeah.
A bomb will not fall. I don't
Someone
think.
bloody hates me, don't they?
Because I also read a piece of trivia that your grandfather was Lionel Jeffries.
Yeah. So my grandfather was Lionel Jeffries. He was like a British character actor, and he was the granddad in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and he directed The Railway Children. So I suppose I sort of grew up with that kind of, I'm very close. Well, I'm very close to my grandmother. Was very close to my grandfather. So grew up with that kind of. Like, there are a lot of people who are a bit famous, or were famous. And I found that quite interesting. And also, so many celebrity children go completely off the rails. And I find that really interesting as well. The fact that, at the time I started writing this, this is really sad to say now, but I was seeing Peaches Geldof a lot in the press, and her coming out of clubs and, taking drugs and stuff. And I started thinking, how we all had these expectations of her. She sort of couldn't escape this script that she'd already got written for her. And then I started thinking, well, what if you had an even bigger burden than that? What if you were named after your parents' most famous piece of work? What would that be like? The answer is pretty terrible. But yeah.
Well, partly because the Ida. We're just going to put you in like a terrarium. So the Ida in the book is trouble. She murders someone. The Ida in the play, whereas Ida, here comes help. I think no, okay. So that is a horrible burden when you're named after someone you perceive to be awful.
Thank you.
Oh, there we go. So in a sense, Ida feels that the script of her life was already written for her by her mother, doesn't she?
Yes.
Yeah. Whereas in your book, I think the problem is more the case that Coco feels that her mother didn't didn't give her enough hints and ideas about going forward. So I wonder if you can set up the premise of your book, because we're going to come back to mothers and daughters and that horrible tangled relationship. But let's look at your book a little bit, spotlight on you now. Why don't you set up the premise of the book?
It's about a mother and her grown-up daughter, and they hardly see one another. But when the mother is dying, the daughter decides to move in with her mother to take care of her, not because she really likes this or wants to do this, but because she wants to be a good daughter. The mother really wants to die alone, but you cannot say that to your daughter. So she lets her move in, and it's about how they torment each other with their good intentions, as women tend to do.
Yes, they do. Can you give us a flavor of
Yes.
the book? And then
I'm going to read from the beginning, so that's easy.
oh, that's good. Where they run into each other.
Where they run into each other unexpectedly. For the first time in her life, Elizabeth unexpectedly runs into her daughter. She comes out of the chemist's on the Overtoom, is about to cross over to the tram stop when she sees her daughter cycling along the other side of the street. Her daughter sees her too. Elizabeth stops walking. Her daughter stops paddling, but doesn't yet brake. The entire expanse of the Overtoom separates them. 2 bike paths, 2 lanes of traffic, and a double tram line. Elizabeth realizes at once that she has to tell her daughter that she is dying, and smiles, like a person about to tell a joke. She often finds making conversation with her daughter difficult, but now she really does have something to say to her. A split second later, it occurs to her that you mustn't convey news like that with too much enthusiasm, and perhaps not here either. In the meantime, she crosses the street and thinks about her doctor, how he keeps asking her, "Are you telling people?" and how nice it would be to be able to give the right answer at her next appointment. She crosses between 2 cars. Her daughter brakes and gets off her bike. Elizabeth clutches the plastic bag from the chemist's containing morphine plasters and cough mixture. The bag is proof of her illness, as though her words alone wouldn't be enough. The bag is also her excuse, because she hadn't really wanted to say it here so inappropriately on the street. But the bag has given her away, hasn't it? Yes? And now, so abruptly, Elizabeth is crossing the street, slips behind a tram because it isn't right. Her child on one side of the street and she on the other. It isn't right to run into your daughter unexpectedly. The daughter used to be there all the time, and later, when she wasn't, Elizabeth would be the one who had dropped her off. Later still, there were visiting arrangements, and in recent years, not much at all. In any case, the birthdays remained. Things had always been clear-cut, and she'd got used to not thinking about the daughter when the daughter wasn't there. She existed at prearranged times. But now there she was on her bike while they hadn't planned to meet, and it was wrong and had to be resolved, transformed, assimilated. She still has a tram line to cross, just behind a taxi that toots its horn. Her daughter pulls her bike up onto the pavement. The final lane is empty. And then an awkward conversation starts where the mother tells her daughter that she's dying, and then says, "Oh, maybe it wasn't the right place to tell I'm going."
One thing I love is the very, very precise way you capture things. For example, you haven't said that the mother was divorced from the father, but it's there. It's there in the fact that they're obviously visiting hours, etc. You have a boyfriend who goes to Coco. The Coco is the daughter, and she goes to the restaurant with her boyfriend, who orders off a menu so obnoxiously. A, you'd think he was American. B, you just know everything you need to know about his personality in that one moment. And I'm wondering, how do you choose what your details? Is it from watching people and observing them, or how do you decide which is the precise, exact detail that's going to pin that person to the page?
Well, the scene you're referring to, it's about that they go to a Chinese restaurant, she and her father, her stepmother, and her boyfriend, and I wanted to show how her boyfriend believes in maakbaar, in a world where everything is possible. You can ask for everything, and he says, "I want." So they order a rice table. How do you say also a rice table? But the waiter says you cannot. For 3 persons, because he wants something else. And the waiter says you cannot order a rice table for 3 persons. It's just for 2 of a 4. You know how this goes in restaurants. Yeah. And he says, which is sort of reasonable, but that's stupid. Why can't we just order a rice table for 3? Because he's being reasonable. But sometimes when someone is too reasonable, he becomes really obnoxious. And I love this example, because he keeps going on about a rice table for 3 persons, and he finally gets his rice table, and we all agree that it should be possible, a rice table for 3 persons, if for 2 and 4 is also possible, but we also agree that it's obnoxious to go on about it for half an hour.
But the book is studded with these little beautiful moments where you've picked on something. And I'm just wondering, do you spend a lot of time watching people and taking notes? And I know a lot of writers do that.
It just goes automatically.
And since this is the first book in English, what did you work a lot with? Do you normally work with your translators, and did you work with this translator
I actually never talked to the translator.
at all?
No.
Do you not get nervous that your book won't be the same book, that they'll take your book and run with it? No, obviously not.
No, well, if I would start thinking about that, I would get worried. But it's like with bringing up children, you know, pick your battles, and that's in my entire life. I pick my battles, so I worry about what I write, and the rest they just I just hope it's going well.
Well, it doesn't. I was talking to your publisher earlier. It doesn't read like something that wasn't. It's not. It reads very organically, as if it was written in English. So, I think a good job has been done. But of course, I
heard the translator's nominated for a translation prize,
Oh,
so
there you
she
go.
mustn't have been done too bad.
yeah, that's tremendous. And working for theater and for film, how do the different ways that you need to work, the different kinds of writing, does one inform the other? Are they completely separate? Do you keep them all in separate compartments?
No, I'm at this moment I'm working with someone adapting this book for the film. So then it's overlapping, but that's kind of difficult. What's so nice in a novel, you are the boss of everything. But you also are responsible for everything, and what I tend to. I don't really like descriptions. I forget to say how one looks, what color hair my main character has. Does she even have hair? I don't talk about it. But sometimes you have to in a novel. But when you write for a film, you don't. There are a lot of things that the set dresser does, or the director. It's only the essence of what is happening and what are they saying. And not how does this tree look like, or how does it smell? I don't care. But sometimes I have to in a book, but for a movie I don't.
And yet your characters are extremely vivid without being described. They're vivid because of what they do.
It's because of what they say and what they do, yes. But sometimes, I write long dialogue, and then afterwards I have to put something in between, like as she takes a sip. Sometimes I really get bored, because what I see is only how they look. I see whether they look at each other or not. But you cannot write in a book 200 times she looks at him saying, You can do that in a script.
Right, because
Because we do not hear that sentence, but this is what we see.
So do you prefer film? Sounds like you're liking film.
It's a new discovery for me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is film very different from writing a play then?
Yes. Theater is much more in the direction of poetry. It's so everything is being. It's all about people who talk. You cannot. You cannot show very much.
Yeah. True.
So much language, so much talk. Well, it's a strange thing, theater. It's less natural than film.
It's like in, because I wrote theatre as well, but it's like poetry in that every word is so important.
And has to work harder?
Yeah, every word has to work harder, and it's really important and interrogated, every word. Whereas in film, I think you have a bit more freedom. And in novels as well, just because there's so many words. I think you have a bit more freedom, but I find that in theatre it's much tighter, maybe.
Well, I find the most difficult, I find that it feels so unnatural. There's people who have to say everything. I just came from the chemist, But I also like it, especially in Greek tragedies. I really like Greek tragedies, and that's all. In the Greek tragedy, nothing happens on stage. It's all happened just the day before on another place. So Medea comes. Oh, what did I do with my children? It's not that we see it.
Yeah,
that's sort of
so that appeals
fun,
to
interesting.
You. Well, let's get down to the nitty-gritty now. You've both written about the mother-daughter dynamic. Now, although some of us in the audience are men, we've all had mothers. Whether we had them for a long time or a short time, we wouldn't be here without mothers. And especially for women, that relationship can be really fraught. And in both books, the daughters are as bad as the mothers. And in fact, both Ida and Coco, I loved them both, but I found that they were difficult women. And they could have easily lost the reader's sympathy. So I wondered, did you just relish writing a bad, naughty character, or did you find it difficult? Was it something you loved doing? Or?
I did. I mean,
you did, which?
I relished it. I kind of got a bit angry about the fact that there are a lot of male outsiders or in male sort of outsider protagonists in fiction, and that men in fiction are allowed to be nasty or bad, or they have bad habits and they drink a lot, and and they don't necessarily have to be likable. And I sort of set myself a bit of a challenge, really, to write a book where the women are interesting but not necessarily likable. And I think a lot of women and some men have really enjoyed that about my book, and really enjoyed her because she's just doesn't give a shit, and she is funny and brave and sort of brazen. But I have had a few people who've said, no, I don't. But that's all right. That's life, I think. And I think there aren't enough, women always seem to have redeeming features. And I think her redeeming features are that she does the things that you're not brave enough to do, and that she's funny, really, and that she's really vulnerable, actually, is probably another redeeming feature. And she's good deep down. Yeah.
And what about for you?
I'm not as... I didn't really want her to be bad, but she becomes...
well, she's self-destructive.
She becomes sort of manic, and she cannot... she doesn't know what she wants, and she doesn't know what she loves. She only knows that if she wants something, she wants a lot of it. So if she eats a lot. If she drinks a lot. If she wants sex, she wants a lot of it. So there are no boundaries, but it's not... But it's because she gets manic. It's not about doing something you shouldn't do. It's nothing.
But in her self-destructiveness, as a reader, sometimes I wanted to just grab her and say, "Stop doing that. You're only making yourself feel worse." And in that way, that's a character who could potentially alienate the reader in their sort of willful highway to hell.
Most of the time, if the reader understands the character, then they can do anything.
Yeah.
But she doesn't do very worse things. And maybe she sleeps with 3 men and drinks 3 nights a lot. But I don't know. Maybe it's because it's a woman. But people then talk about how she misbehaves. But it's not that bad.
Okay, I'm not going to give away any spoilers. There are 1 or 2 incidents that raised my eyebrows.
1 or 2 incidents.
Yeah. I actually scarily I recognize myself in this girl. So maybe that's what I'm reacting to, my fear for my own safety. I'm exonerated. But I also felt that you both explore this notion of how much space is a woman allowed to occupy? How safe is it for a woman to have big appetites for things, whether it's sex or love or drink or adventure? And I thought that was brave on both your parts, to just go out there and say, look, women have every bit as big an appetite as any man.
That is definitely something that is a theme in both our books, is that Ida is very tall and quite fat, like me. But yeah, and your Coco is fat, or getting fatter. And I like that as well. But apart from anything else, I just think it's a bit of a, because it's so rare that you have that as a protagonist in a book. If they're nasty or naughty, they're gorgeous. You think even in let me think, what's that, Winona Ryder and Angelina Jolie, what's that film called? There's a psychiatric hospital.
Oh, Girl Interrupted?
Yeah. You should go to a psychiatric hospital. They're all minging, smoking roll-ups. It's like, I don't know. It's, it's real women, really. Just real women, I suppose.
Yeah.
I always have women as characters, and I've written 6 novels, and they're all, and they do all things that women and men do. So I'm actually still surprised that it's an issue that they are women, my characters.
It's not an issue, but I thought it was certainly noteworthy. You didn't write about just children generally. You definitely wrote about the mother-daughter dynamic, both of you. And of course, Coco's mother is problematic in her own. Both mothers are problematic in their own way. But I was also intrigued by this idea of wrapping things up at death. I mean, part of the problem is that the mother wants to die alone, and the daughter wants to sort of solve the relationship quickly in the last moments. And Ida can't, her mother's dead already. She can't have that moment of closure. I just wonder, do you think we put too much emphasis on death and what we have, all the boxes we have to tick before someone's allowed to die peacefully?
The whole idea, if you have something to say, do it now before it's too late, and that it's important. When did you see her for the last time? Everything becomes so symbolic, but it's terrible when you are ill and you are dying, and everyone around you is trying to have the last meaningful conversation. So
so that's obviously
yes, I have my doubts about this whole the romantic thing about how dying goes.
Yeah, what the Americans call closure.
Yeah. Fuck closure. There's no closure. That Dennis Potter in his last interview, he talked about his father and how he couldn't, how it was hard for him to tell him about his work. And that his father wanted to come in and see what he was doing, and he was annoyed, like, I'm writing, go away. And then he says, but I have let him in. And he meant years and years after he was dead. He said, I have let him in. And he meant the closure, it's something he did within himself and not with his father.
Yeah. Well, in fact, it's something Ida has to do as well, because Bridie's gone. She has to come to her own sense of who her mother really was.
I think maybe it's this is maybe a separate issue, but I'm really interested in the relationships between adult women and their mothers. Well, maybe adult men and their fathers and mothers as well. But this idea, it's very hard to learn how to be a child, as an adult, and to work out that relationship. And I don't think there's anything really said about it or anything set, and it's constantly this process of trying to work out what you mean to each other. I mean, I don't need my mother in the same way that I needed her. Even when I was 25, I probably needed her more, for support and advice about, what to do about the damp in my flat or whatever. You know what I mean? And I think it's, this constantly changing relationship. And it's almost like, in my book, it's almost like a release. Like, it's like, sort of then she can assess then what happened and what their relationship was about and what it was like. But I think that's just the nature of especially mother-daughter relationships, is this like constantly changing odd thing between these two women. who maybe don't really need each other, but they feel sort of attached in a sort of inexplicable way.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, yeah.
And do you think that, I don't have an answer for this, so if you don't, I won't penalize you. Do you think children owe their parents anything? Do you think they have a duty of care to their parents as their parents get older? I mean, one of the things that I sort of found entertaining about Coco was that her first thought when she found out her mother was dying was, oh good, I'll get lots of sympathy now. And I thought, oh God, I actually recognize that kind of behavior.
I once had a friend and his father died when he was 15, and he said, but he died at the beginning of summer holiday. So 6 weeks after everyone at school had forgotten about it. He was really annoyed. But,
I think it's really odd. I'm 33 and I'm sort of, thinking about having children myself, and I think how ungrateful I am and what a fucking cow I am to my mum, and that's when it really hits me, really. It's like this confusion about this relationship and what do you owe your parents and what would I want from a child, And I do think you do owe them. Yeah, you do. You do. I mean, even if I'm going to find it really difficult, you do. They did a lot for you. Doesn't mean it's not difficult, though.
They sort of brought it on themselves, huh?
Yeah. that teenage thing. You remember when you were teenage? I didn't ask to be born.
There's an old Dutch song that goes, "Thank you, parents, thank you that my crib could stand in your house." And as a child, I was already, duh. Why should I be grateful for that? But if you have a child, if you take care of it, but
in theory,
yeah, but it's much nicer for yourself to look at it in another way. That it's really nice to take care of your parents as well as they took care of you, because it gives you something, and not because you owe them.
But in Coco's case, she doesn't feel she was well looked after.
No, she has her own reasons to move in with her mother, and also partly because she has no house.
Yeah. She's nothing if not an opportunist.
And also, let's do the right thing, and also to annoy her father.
Yes.
And her boyfriend and her stepmother, who all say, well, your mother is terrible. And the louder they say your mother is terrible, the louder she thinks, but she's my mother.
Well, exactly. Now, we have about a little over 15 minutes left. What I'd like to do is see if we can turn up the house lights, because it really is hard to see. There is a roving microphone. And what I'm hoping is that, no, there isn't. We're going to take Amy's microphone off her. And if she wants to speak, she'll have to cuddle up to me and talk into my little face area here. If you just raise your hands, we'll call on as many people as we can. Question right here in the...
I don't know, I've missed this point, but the characters are not reflection of your own stories of your own mothers, or can you relate to the characters that you wrote about?
For me, it's more that the two characters, the mother and the women, they have two really incompatible personalities. They're really different from one another, and they're my two sides of me. So I'm both of them. Than that they look anything like my mother or my daughter. Luckily.
I think I've got a lot of alcoholism in my family, but on my father's side, actually. Can you hear me at the back? Yes. I thank my mother for this voice. But again, I think there's a lot of nonsense spoken about. Like every character is you. Every character is you. Really, they are. And I think definitely they're two sides of me, the mother and the daughter. But yeah, No, my mother's not an alcoholic. She wants me to always say that. She does like a bottle of Suave. But yeah.
Okay. Is there another question? Don't be shy. Oh, look, they've gone all quiet on us. Okay, we have another question from the same person and a question at the back. Let's have the back first, and then we can come back. Of course, this turns this into an aerobic event for our lovely assistant.
I haven't read either book yet, but I'm just curious whether in these books or if perhaps in the future you have anything to say about the mother's relationship with their own mothers and that trilogy.
I talk about the mother's own mother a bit in the book, a little bit. Yeah, a bit. But I do think it's this whole, I mean, you know, if you read like therapy books, like I have read a million of, you know, this idea about scripts and like learning patterns and stuff, and you see these things reflected over and over and over again, these patterns. And my book's very much a lot about that, really. These stories keep getting repeated. Yeah. Oh, you don't need it?
No.
You're not planning to write anything about, it's Elizabeth, right?
Yes.
About her mother.
No, she has no role. I did wrote something about the family she came from, but it didn't make it into the book.
And you had another question?
So it's just your own point of view, the stories. You didn't research attachment theory or anything like that in a serious way to reflect in the dynamics of the relationship?
I didn't know. No, I didn't do research like that. No, I did maybe. Well, the mother is slightly. Well, she wasn't diagnosed, as they say in the book, but they think she's slightly autistic, or the entire family thinks. I did some research on that.
No, I didn't do any research like that. I mean, I've read a lot of pop psychology books and stuff, but really, I didn't need any of that, really. I mean, I did a lot of research in the fact I'm 33 and I've got a mother. 33 years of research. Bloody awful. But yeah, I mean, it's not... no, it's just drawn from my own relationships and relationships with the people around me, really.
Oh.
It's not... I mean, because also Ivor in the book has got a lot of qualities you'd think of as somebody who is bipolar, I think. But I never made it explicit, really. Yeah.
Is it true? I read that you began your book that it was about a woman dying, assessing all the possessions in her life.
Yes, I
And that
started.
it wasn't
with,
going
yeah.
to be this book at all.
Well, yeah, it was. I was when I started writing. I wrote the end at first. It was the mother, and she died, and she came to heaven, and heaven for her was a place where all the stuff she once possessed is there, and everything is complete, and everything is new and shiny, and you know, everything you ever possessed, every puzzle, you know, no piece is missing, and this was her heaven.
Yeah.
And I wanted to write a book about someone who looked back on her life just by all the stuff she once possessed, from looking down from that heaven. And that became really a really inward story. And then I thought, what is the worst thing a woman like this could overcome? What's the worst thing that could happen to her? And I thought, well, she has to have a child. A child messes everything up.
Literally and figuratively. Yes. And did you find that the book that you've written is not the book you started to write? Sorry. Oh, the look.
No, I've probably written I don't even know. I've written this book, you know, it's over and over again, really. I think writing your first book, you learn to write a book, kind of. Hopefully, you do. Or you learn that you're really crap and you shouldn't ever write another one. But I think, yeah, so I've written it over and over again, really. It's been through many iterations. I think now the bit I read you actually, I didn't make that clear as a flashback. But it is set over the course of a week. But to start with, I just sort of forgot about things like, timelines. So it just sort of started and just went on forever. So yeah, it's been lots of different ways.
Yeah. More questions from the floor? There's several in the back. We need you to keep your hands up because nobody. Excellent. So, sorry, I'm looking. Okay, and then over here, there's two. Hello?
Hi, I was just wondering what sort of reaction you got off your mums when you published the books.
Well, yours doesn't want to be labeled an alcoholic, and we have to discuss this.
Well, you have. I don't know if this is if I can translate this, but there's an expression. If something is hard, you said I had to swallow. I had to swallow this, and she said, I had to swallow I had to swallow when you read. No, I had to. It was really strange. I had to swallow when I read about blowjobs. That's what she said.
Oh, sorry.
Really seriously. I sort of had to swallow when I read about blowjobs. And then I said this in a TV show, how funny it was that my mother said that. But then they put that on the newspaper as quote of the week, my mother said. And I thought my mother said, Mom, you're on the newspaper.
And what was her reaction to
But
that?
she had to laugh about it. It was but once there was a journalist at my parents' house, and after 5 minutes said, she's not your mother, and then she was really relieved.
I see.
What I've learned, and this, I don't think this is because my parents are particularly mercenary, awful people. What I've learned is you can do pretty much anything if you're vaguely successful. They just go, all right, they just brush everything. They're fine with it, absolutely fine. Because I was on a website, somebody's website once. I was really, 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 really scared about them reading it. But they were absolutely great about it. And my first show was I had a really difficult relationship with them when I left home when I was 16 and moved into this horrible bedsit. And the first show I made was autobiographical, and it was about that. And the first day it was on, the person who was in the show with me, I thought he'd gone out, but he was in the house, and he said I was crying like a pterodactyl. You could hear me like this sort of bizarre, and I thought I could never do it. But they're fine. If you're successful, they do not care.
I was interviewing Faye Weldon once, and I said, I'd love to write a novel about my horrible ex-husband. She goes, I've done that a million times. She said, here's the trick. The way you don't get sued is you always say they were great in bed. Then you can say anything else you want about them, as long as you make sure that the character is really a good lover. I wrote that down.
My grandma sent me a card. My grandma is a worldly wise woman. She is an actress, but she was quite shocked, I think. And she wrote me a card, and she doesn't really swear, and she just went, I thought it was fucking brilliant. There's a lot of swearing in it. And, yeah.
Okay, there are two in the back, or possibly more.
I thought both characters had very fixed ideas about who their mother was, and that changed a bit when other people came in to the circle. In Coco's case, it was her mom's employer came in, and it happened in the other book too. Someone else came in, and the girls were both and the girls were quite surprised that this different person existed. And I wonder if that's part of when we experience other people in our mothers' lives, that we begin to see them, as other people, not just our mothers, and that's maybe when we start to change, the relationship becomes adult to adult instead of mother-child. And in both books, if the girls had had a little bit more time with their moms, that it might have moved on to a happier place for all of them.
Yeah, I agree. It's true that you can have this. You can get stuck in a relationship where you can only see them in one way, but how older you get, it changes every year, and especially when you meet friends of your parents or ask them about their parents, and it's sort of the joy of getting older.
I think that it's really true for all of us, though, isn't it? That we're like completely different people. Like, I know some people who think I'm like the worst person. Well, I don't know them anymore. But some people who think I'm like the worst person in the world, you know. And other people who think I'm incredibly kind, and other people who think I'm, you know. So I think that is just life, isn't it? Is that you are completely different things to different people. And I think, yeah, in my book, as Peter is Bridie, the mother's best friend, and he's a gay man. He does a lot of like end of pier farces, and he's a pantomime dame in touring, you know, in pantomimes and stuff. And he has this lovely relationship with Bridie, even though he knows how awful she is. And they have this soft, sort of gentle relationship because they knew each other since they were young. But I think that is what it's like, isn't it?
Yeah, but especially with parents, then it's so. It takes a while before you see them as an adult, or as
separate from you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's another one back.
Hello. It's just a comment rather than a question. All the women in this audience were all daughters, but we're not all mothers or sisters. So isn't it the daughter that's central rather than the mother that we all focus on?
Well, it's true we probably have spoken more about the daughters than the mothers. That may be my fault, directing the questions in that.
Well, my book is third person, but it's told from the perspective of Ida, the daughter. I mean, I'm not a mother, and I'm actually not a sister, and there's a sister in the book. But yeah, it's totally told from the perspective of the daughter, not the mother.
Yeah, in my book, I have two perspectives, mother and daughter, but she's such an atypical mother.
Atypical, yeah.
Atypical, yeah.
Yes.
Atypical, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
She's really not typical in a brilliant way.
Really not typical, yeah. She tries not to be a mother.
I found her very endearing. I really enjoyed her. I enjoyed being inside her mind. But I could relate to, you know that thing of you just want to be left alone, leave me alone, go away.
Yeah.
So. We have time for let's have one last question. I see your hand up. And then I can see you're all starting to fade in the heat.
Hiya, I was just wondering, in book about Ida, she's got a sister. Do you think like mothers kind of learn from their mistakes and kind of become a better mother second time round, or is it always going to be dysfunctional no matter what happens? Is there any hope for us? Is basically what I'm saying.
What? I'm one of three, and there's massive gaps in between us. There's 13 years in between me and my youngest brother, 8 years between me and my second youngest. I was completely mad. My middle brother was neurotic, and my younger brother is totally normal. And I genuinely think they just learn how to be parents, which is normal, isn't it? Of course you do. Of course. She realised she did loads of stuff wrong. And that's just human nature. Again, it's one of those things we expect parents to do, be perfect immediately. And yeah, they didn't know. They were young. They were crap a bit. But Mum, I'm sorry if you're watching this. Anyway, yeah. But yeah, I think that's normal.
If we could become better parents than our parents.
Yeah. Do you have children?
Yes, I have a daughter.
But just the one. So you don't know if subsequent children you'd improve.
If I would improve, no. No, which is what a difference is. I think between our generations, mine and my mother's, she was much younger when she got children than I. Yeah. If I were that young and I would have been a terrible mom. My mom is much better than I am.
Yeah. Tremendous. Well, I think what we'll do is we'll leave it there. I will remind you all, first book award. Both books are eligible. Please cast your vote. We're going to go into the bookshop. I'm going to position them behind stacks of books with pens and encourage you to come and say hello. If you were too shy to ask your question when you get your book signed, you could ask it now.
I have got a boyfriend, if that was your question.
And before I hustle them out the door, can we please thank Amy and Esther?